Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's training industry webinar, Calculated Success, How the Society of Actuaries Delivers Learner Value, sponsored by Meridian Knowledge Solutions. I'm Sarah Gallo, an editor at Training Industry. Happy all of you could join us for today's event. Before we get started, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our presenters today and the program overall. Of course, feel free to chat any questions you have into your Q&A window and any comments you have into your chat. Of course, we'll address all of these comments and questions either during the event or at the end of the session during the dedicated Q&A. Of course, today's event is being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com. As always, you'll receive that follow-up email from us with a link to the recording and slides from today. You'll also notice that a brief survey is popped open in your browser after the program. As always, we welcome any feedback you have for us regarding our presenters, content, or anything else you would like to share. Here at Training Industry, we are the most trusted source of information on the business of learning. If you haven't done so already, check out our resources at trainingindustry.com, including original content, articles, blogs, our award-winning Training Industry magazine, our award-winning podcast, The Business of Learning, original research reports, and of course, Training Industry courses. You can access all of these resources now at trainingindustry.com. All right, everybody, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for the day, Michael Wolfe and Leslie Fausher. Michael Wolfe is the Director of eLearning for the Society of Actuaries, the world's largest actuarial professional organization. He has been with the SOA for 3 years, leading a number of recent initiatives to modernize elements of the SOA's education pathways. Michael has spent almost 20 years in the learning field in both internal and consultative roles in organizations ranging from industry associations to one of the world's premier professional services firms. He holds an undergraduate engineering degrees from Washington University in St. Louis and a Ph.D. in computer science from Northwestern. Leslie began her career at the Society of Actuaries in 1995 in the IT department with a computer science degree. She transitioned to the education department during the emergence of e-learning in 2003 and managed the release of their first e-learning modules via their proprietary learning management system. She now manages 2 learning management systems, a learning content management system, and the delivery of SOA's e-learning content through those systems. All right, with that, you are in good hands. Leslie, Michael, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who has joined. Before we begin, wanted to just thank everybody for joining. And we'll get into a couple of the themes that we want to address today. Please do along the way, if you have questions, you have the chat. We and Sarah will be monitoring those. I know we'll reserve time for Q&A at the end. However, we're happy to address those along the way as topics come up, as areas of interest strike you. So please do go ahead and let us know. That would be a lot easier for us and more informative for you. I must say, I'm still trying to figure out who those 2 people were who were pictured in that opening slide. I think that was us, but I'm not sure. Okay. Leslie, you have the slide, right?
I do.
Okay.
So let's go to the first one.
Let's move on. So the 3 themes that we wanted to address today in terms of how we're delivering value to our candidates and members. One is in the area of xAPI and a little bit about what that is, but more so how we're looking to use it. One of the particular features in our ecosystem that we have found to be particularly helpful in our internal processes that we thought we wanted to highlight and bring to the front. And then it particularly related to many of the pivots that I'm sure everyone has experienced through 2020 and 2021, how we've been able to use our existing ecosystem to deliver blended learning. Just one I think just for context, we'll talk a little bit at the beginning about sort of who we are and what we do. So with that, and Leslie, I think I'm seeing next slide, notes, agenda. So I think, yes, we are. We're getting the whole,
okay.
They're getting the whole kit and caboodle there.
Let's go back to Zoom and see what we can do here.
For some reason, it was giving us your view.
That's okay. We can fix that.
I think we can.
Okay, just a moment here.
Okay. We'll put a little music in the background while we address our
Thank you.
Our technical difficulties.
Okay. Almost there, folks. Okay, from beginning.
That looks like
And there
we go.
Is that better?
That looks a lot better.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think we wanted to start out with
I think we want to get a sense of where our audience is at, just based on the 3 topics that we said that we wanted to talk about. And I think Sarah will queue up the poll. This is a choose all that apply. Tell us what you're interested in hearing about. We will, to some extent, probably hit all 3, but if there's some that are of less interest to everybody, we'll try to gloss over those.
All right, everyone, take a few more seconds, pop your answer into that poll. 3, 2, 1. There we are.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Looks like topics 1 and 3. So the multi-authoring review we will figure out how to, well, we might even just sort of skip that, but we'll give you the highlights of that, but we'll definitely focus on the 1st and the 3rd. Okay, let's move on.
Okay. So before we provide a bit of background about the SOA, we'd like to take another poll to see how familiar everybody is with actuaries.
So I'll do the funny you should ask, chat us a story. My familiarity with actuaries before I joined the SOA was through my wife, who was at the time was a CPA, so did public audits, and I would hear a lot about how when they documented their procedures, there was a lot of because the actuaries told us. So I knew that they were providing some level of detailed support on how it was that auditors did what they did, but that was a very narrow, really narrow introduction to what it is that actuaries do.
Perfect. Well, let's see what everyone else put in here. And there's your results.
Good. All right, Leslie, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah.
Although I'm looking for stories too, but we'll carry on.
Okay, so the SOA is a North American association that was founded in 1949, and we've grown to over 30,000 global members. We maintain high professional standards for actuaries, and we conduct research on actuarial trends and public policy issues. So that's our main mission. And of course, we also provide primary and continuing education to our candidates and practicing actuaries. So that's a little bit more about us and what we do. So hopefully that answers some questions out there.
I think my short answer to the question of what is an actuary is they're really good at modeling and quantifying risk. So for those who don't know what an actuary does, that's the really, really short version. And what the SOA does, it primarily is provide primary and secondary education. The areas that Leslie and I speak to more directly are in the primary education space. So this would be what we call pre-qualification, before an actuary becomes designated as an actuary. That's the area where Leslie and I speak to the most. And then other parts of our organization deal primarily with post-qualification, or what many would consider to be continuing ed or professional development. So the area we'll talk out mostly is before qualification, but if people have questions about the broader picture, we can address those. We have some connection points to those. So sounds like some people wanted to hear about xAPI and how we're using it. So before we do that, you tell us, give us a sense what you know about xAPI. Sarah will get that poll up there just to get a sense of who's listening. Yeah, so is xAPI something you know a lot about, a little bit about, or aren't you guys going to tell us what it is?
Everyone, again, take another second, pop your answer into that poll on your screen. 3, 2, 1. There we go.
Okay, so all right, so moderate to minimal. Okay, good. So that's where we were. I would say about a year or two ago, and you know, we were hearing about what is this thing and why should we be considering it. Thanks, sir. So we can move on. So very quickly, what is it? If you know what SCORM is, I guess I was going to say was, but if you know what SCORM is, that's what xAPI is. It's just, it is a standard, it's a protocol for how courses talk to learning management systems and other parts of the technological ecosystem. It has what I would consider to be fairly significant advantages, but that's the really direct question to answer to what is it? It is a format in which one publishes courses so that course can talk to other parts of the system. What's worth highlighting here is the ecosystem we have in place, where we have an authoring environment to manage content with a learning management system that delivers, and other backend systems. This was a relatively quick transition for us because we had all of the pieces in place to do it. What you're seeing on the screen is what's going on behind the scenes, that in this protocol, modules are telling other parts of the system what various users are doing with fairly granular visibility. So it's not user started module, user finished module, or user passed module. It's user X is doing such and such within the system. Now users might be doing this, and the level of tracking you get is up to you. Okay.
Michael.
Yeah, Sean.
If you don't mind, I'll jump in and ask a question. Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Osborne. I run product management for Meridian. I've spoken with a lot of our customers recently who are on the cusp of getting going with xAPI. You know, many people are still using SCORM, and I'm curious, what prompted the Society of Actuaries to move forward with xAPI 2 years ago?
So great question. It's a nice segue into this slide, but I'll answer it directly. There's been a shift that we've seen in, I would say, just in the space broadly, but in the association space, in being more metric and results driven. So it's a little bit less about, okay, what did we deliver? And a little bit more about, well, how well did we deliver it and what impact did it have? And so in terms of measuring value, xAPI provides more insight into what is going on with learners and how they're interacting with courses and the features of our courses and how well they're being received and what results are they driving. So with a desire to say, well, let's get better at measuring results and delivering value, xAPI was a significant part of the answer to that. Up until that point, our modules to us are black boxes, right? Learners start them and they finish them. And there's a bunch of magic that happens in between. And we want to know more about what's going on between the beginning point and the end point. So Sean, did that answer the question?
I think it does. Thank you. I'm
Okay.
sure more as we go.
Okay, and now, so with the segue to the slide then, in fact, I think I just talked about all this, right? So that is why we went into xAPI. It gives us visibility into what's going on with the learners, and then we can use that as feedback into the design and development process. You know, whether it's the value of a particular resource or looking at the behavior over time of a learner, the information that's being tracked in the xAPI protocol is giving us the information we need to make better decisions about that. All righty. So that was the beginning of the answer to Sean's question. That's where we started. Where we are now is in a bit more of an advanced step where we're using, because we now have information about where our candidates are in a particular learning experience, we can now organize them in different ways. For example, some of our modules now organize learners into cohorts. As they register and start a program, we know where they are in that program, and we can then put them in a group with other learners who are at roughly the same point in their journey. As they complete a module, they'll move on to the next one. And we manage that cohort we manage that cohort as it moves through. They're very fluid in our environment. We have thousands of candidates. They're not all progressing at the same rate, so they'll kind of jump tracks, but we can actually help them in that journey to connect them with other candidates who are likely to be at about the same point in their journey. So it gives them a common ground to connect with each other and talk about what they're doing in their learning environment. That's what we're doing now. We've just started that, and we're already seeing some very interesting and promising behaviors, from our candidates. For example, at a point where they get to an assessment, we're seeing groups of candidates who have never spoken with each other ask each other questions about the assessment, about how they're approaching the assessment, about certain technicalities of the assessment. And we've seen comments already with people saying, for example, without this, I would have never known that, would have never known to go about this question that way had we not connected. All right. Where we're going with this is sort of in our thought process now, not necessarily even being developed, but once you have cohorts of learners, you can actually now start to build collaborative experiences. So not just learners in a group talking to each other about whatever, which is wonderful from an engagement perspective, but in terms of learning engagement, now we would have the ability to say, for example, of the 50 people in a certain cohort, when 20 of them have gotten past a certain point, that would be a great time to seed a question amongst the group or to throw them a quiz and see if they've understood something, to reinforce, to consolidate learning, to get them talking about the content. This is in our e-learning programs. Traditionally, it's a very one-on-one experience, and this gives us the ability to begin thinking about how to transform that experience into something that's truly social and truly engaging with other candidates in the system. So that's what we're beginning to explore now, and that's all because xAPI gives us the information to help them organize. They could have always done it themselves. There's always, they could, whatever social platform they want to use. But given how distributed our audience is, this gives us a way of mediating that conversation and mediating that process. That's where we're going.
Okay. And this is something that is really close to my heart, and I know a few of you were somewhat interested in it. So we're going to move on to multi-authoring review. So by nature, our content requires ongoing revision and review cycles. We are literally in a constant state of new development or revision, and that's due to regulatory changes in the health arena, pensions, insurance, you name it. So we really need to remain relevant and accurate with all of our content. So these content changes must be made by volunteers who are spread across the US, Canada, globally. And there was a lot of difficulty in entering and executing those module edits. So even more challenging was maintaining the edit history. It was literally a game of hunt and peck through network drives to see what was done and why it was done. So I'm going to talk just briefly about this. I've actually shared a little bit of our review process, and at this point, I think we'd like to poll the audience to see what your content review process looks like.
I wonder, Leslie, because at the beginning we asked, okay, sort of, is this topic of interest? And a lot of people said no. So I'm curious to see if this, based on what people say their process is, maybe our process, we just are in a different world in terms of the nature of our review process, or maybe it's something that the audience hasn't thought about yet that we've buzzed into first.
Could be.
All right, everyone, take a few more moments, pop your answer into that poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. There we go.
Okay.
So Leslie, that's really interesting. So everyone said,
is.
not too interested in how this whole multi-author, multiple reviewer thing works. Maybe it's because they've got it solved. And maybe we were behind the curve. I don't know, but
Could
that's
be.
interesting. It's interesting.
It is interesting. So once that poll goes away, I'm going to go to this slide, which I have a love-hate relationship with. So I'll tell you why I'm not fond of it. So what you're looking at here is one of our old content review templates. And this is from a volunteer that was revising one of our system overview modules back in 2009. And you might think, well, this looks simple to follow. What's the problem? All they have to do is enter in the edits that they want. Simple, right? Well, on average, one of our modules does contain hundreds of pages, and our flagship FAP course, our Fundamentals of Actuarial Practice course, contains probably up to 1,500 pages now. I don't know if Michael has insight as to what we're up to yet, but massive amounts of content, and that doesn't even include links, readings, PDFs, downloads. So, and to revise a module is a huge undertaking, and this is what we used to rely on. So imagine getting this template sent to you that contains edits for every page of a module. Now imagine getting it from 6 different volunteers for the same module. And each one wants something different on the same page. And no one knows what the other one submitted. So now imagine the poor sap who has to combine every one of those templates together. And that poor sap was me. I'll admit that. It was a literal game of copy and paste. It was an endless abyss of just combining rows and edits. And it was just such a time-consuming piece of content review that we just had no other way out of for a very long time. So I'm happy to say that these days are behind us. And the reason that they're behind us is because of a great feature of Claro, dominKnow's Claro content review feature. So this looks, in my opinion, a whole lot better. When a module is open for review, you enter a start date, you enter an end date for when the review cycle is open, which that alone saved us tons of time because a lot of times we would get changes in after our deadlines. And we all know how important those deadlines are because the instructional designers need time to affect those changes. So it was great to be able to start and open and end a module at a certain time frame. So here you're looking at a page within dominKnow's Claro, and you will see as a reviewer, I am in here, and because the module is open for review, I see a panel to the right of me. And this is where I can enter in a comment, I can read other comments, and I think with this latest release, I can actually like a comment, which is, it's all simple, but it's very powerful because it streamlines this whole content review process challenge that we experienced for years. And what I think I like best about this is that they're actually on the page that they're editing. They had to copy and paste into a template and copy text in. So it's really nice that they can just look at the page, enter in their comments, and see what everybody else is doing. And this was really a lifesaver for us. So the tool, the content review tool, really did more than just enable them to enter comments. It really encouraged collaboration. It was a collaboration space that opened for our volunteers. It provided insight into the thought process behind content development. And even better, it created a record of everything that they did and allowed us to report on it, to track it, to look back, to even look forward to see what changes might be deferred. So it really captured the whole process of content review from start to finish. It just wasn't a Word document that we're looking at wondering, how do we make sense of this? It really brought it to life and it made it much more functional, and it saved us a literal ton of time. And it allowed stakeholders to review the content after development. And that was very important because our staff actuaries and our volunteers, they're super short on time. So as long as we had everything in order and we had all the edits in there, they can get in there, they can see what page they needed to review, if there was a comment they needed to review. And they really were just in and out, and it was quick and easy for them. And without that, we don't really have any volunteers because they're not going to take the time to copy and paste pages of content into a template. So this one really sold it for us. dominKnow really delivered for us on that one. And there are other clients too, I'm sure. So on the Claro side, this is the admin view, and this may be a little small if you want to enlarge your screens, but I really thought this was important to share because everybody goes ahead and enters in their comments, and on an admin side, you go in there and you can view the page right over here where the change was requested. You could tell the page title here, the description of the request, and the date it was entered. So that captures that part of it. But what else you can do here is you can assign a status to a change. And that was very important to us because a lot of times we couldn't affect all the changes. We had to prioritize, we had to defer, we had to postpone, we had to just flat out cancel changes. So this panel here allowed us to do that and assign that to each edit that came in. And we can also sort by that, and we can assign the priority, like I said, over here as well. And you can also sort by the reviewer that had entered the request. So probably the coolest thing that I think of this page is that you can enter a resolution in right over here. You can assign your own status to it. And then you also have the option to notify the reviewer of the solution. So Claro can go ahead and email that content reviewer because their information is in there with their email address, and they can just get automatic updates about the content edits that they had requested. So that is that was very important to us, and that it was a seller because it saved us so much time and it helped us reach all of our volunteers globally, and it really sped up the content review process for us.
So Leslie, I'm really curious before we move on to the sort of the third of the three topics. I'm actually, if I had a poll, we could enter it on the fly here, but I'm actually curious from the group who's listening in, if there are features there or parts of that process that sort of caught them in terms of that's different than what I do, or that's better than what I do. This is something that, from where I sit, this is a tool for me to communicate with my team and for my team to communicate with me. If there's a certain theme of edit requests that are coming in, what is that? Do I have any visibility into why we're getting certain comments from volunteers or why we're getting certain comments from our stakeholders, and helps me manage our stakeholders because I can see who's commenting on what and how frequently we're getting certain kinds of comments. So for the reporting capability from where I sit, that's what helps me have insight into what kind of feedback we're getting and how we should address it. It's a way I communicate within our organization across the team. We've had meetings with both internal and external stakeholders using that export as a tool for, okay, here's the open comments we've still got. How do we want to address these? As opposed to us having to find some other kind of hands-on way of keeping them organized. So it's been really beneficial to me. And I came in this process long after Leslie had gone through sort of the traumatic experience of doing it with the really with the cumbersome approach. So I am curious, as I've been talking, if people in the audience, as you react to that, let us know what you're seeing and what you're doing that may be different, or less efficient or more efficient. We'd love to hear those stories. So with that, let's hit, I think this one got the most votes in terms of, okay, what are we doing in terms of blended learning delivery? So Leslie, if you hit the next slide, I don't think we'd be alone in saying that 2020 brought change. Just within sort of our education pathway, sort of leading to qualification as an actuary. We have multiple different elements that are placed in sequence, but most notably, there are 2 in-person seminars that sort of wrap up what you do to become an associate and then what you do to become a fellow when you've quote unquote graduated from the system. And those were all in person. There was no virtual option. There was no virtual element. They were live. And our e-learning on the other side was mostly standalone. A few exceptions, and we had begun evolving towards some blended approaches already, but primarily those were the elements of the pathway that weren't exam focused. And then 2020 hit, and we needed to pivot. If we didn't pivot on the in-person seminars, we would have candidates who could not complete their designation. And if we didn't start integrating the elements together, it would leave for a very disjointed experience. There are, outside of that, not on this slide, but outside of what mostly Leslie and I manage, all of our meetings were in person too. So we have major meetings throughout the year, an annual meeting of our membership, that was all in person. And so that too needed to pivot. Everything needed to shift. Okay, so let's hear from all of you what your pivoting experience was like. Did you feel like you had the infrastructure to do what you needed to do? Or maybe, you know what, we actually really didn't have to pivot. Hey, SOA, you needed to pivot, but we didn't. Or we needed to pivot, but we had what we needed. We needed a lot of infrastructural change to support a pivot. Or, yeah, that was a really tough shift.
All right, everyone, take a few more moments, pop your answer into that poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. There we go.
Okay. So a minor vote for the, we were good. But then in the second, third, and fourth buckets. So we were, where were we? We were in the second bucket. Oddly enough, I don't think we realized that we were in the second bucket. When it came to our pre-qualification pathway, we had technology lying underneath that we had never even tapped yet. Outside of that, turning a 2,000 person meeting into a virtual event, I can certainly say that we fell into buckets 3 and 4, more broadly across the Society of Actuaries. In Leslie's and my space, in terms of the pre-qual education, we were in bucket 2, except we didn't know we were there until we were there. And so let's tell you a little bit more about what that journey looked like.
Absolutely. It was a fun journey. It was enlightening because we didn't really know, like Michael said, that we even had the technology under our fingertips here. So when we shifted, we had to do it fast. And we did it simply by using a part of Meridian that we had never used before, which was a classroom. It was there, it was ready, and it worked right out of the box. And we didn't have to do a thing to it. It was in their base product. So what we did is developed our professionalism courses. The content was developed very quickly in dominKnow 1's Claro without issue. And then we published that to Meridian. So we had our professionalism course module. We built a curriculum around that. So we had a curriculum of just the module and then the virtual sessions, the classroom sessions. And we connected the candidates to those classroom sessions using GoToMeeting. Meridian supports several different connectors for virtual sessions. In our version, we're on 19.1. We use GoToMeeting because that was our company standard, and it worked fantastically. Instructors were set up, they were given GoToMeeting accounts, and there weren't any issues really whatsoever. And to date, nearly 3,000 candidates have gone through these virtual sessions, and maybe 2 or 3 of them have an issue, but it was technical issues on their end. So it's nice when things go smoothly and quiet and you don't hear anything. And this was our experience with all this upheaval everywhere else. We were able to deliver these virtual sessions very quickly. After a short orientation by the Meridian folks, we knew how to do it. 5 to 10 minutes to set up a session, and we were up and running. And there were other discussions in the organization going on about, we've got to get a system that can deliver virtual sessions very quickly. How do we do this? And then we said, well, we can do that. So it happened very quickly, very effectively and efficiently. And it really, it was really a good thing to see because it really helped the journey for our candidates to associateship and fellowship. That's their last capstone module that they needed, their last experience. And we were able to bridge that gap without missing a beat.
Yeah, we were at the time, we, like every other, I don't know how many folks online who have designation responsibilities, but we were looking across all industries. We're looking at, we're looking at the legal profession and the medical profession and business profession, saying, for those who are responsible for designation, and there's some piece of that journey that is now disrupted, what are they doing? And how are they managing it? And solutions ranged from well, we're just going to make them show up live anyway, to we're going to grant provisional designations. We're going to give them the designation without the piece that they're missing until they can come back and get it. And with the infrastructure we had, we figured out, oh, wait, we don't have to do either of those. We can actually find what we considered to be the optimal solution. We can very quickly shift from something in person to something virtual. And now some of those experiences may never go back to in person. And if they do, there will still likely be a virtual option, that we've now built out. And we are now, in fact, going through some testing of using the exact same infrastructure to manage a mix of, well, they can do the e-learning plus virtual route, or they can do the e-learning plus going in person to the seminar route, and using Meridian, the combination of Meridian and dominKnow to manage that too. And all of that, the infrastructure supports. And so those are 3,000 candidates who, without this, would have been either significantly delayed in getting their certificate, moving on in the profession, or having some alternative path, which would have been, from our perspective, less than ideal and would have raised questions about, are we still serving the public and are we serving our members in terms of qualifying actuaries?
Absolutely. Okay, so here's another technical page that I wanted to share for those who are interested. I think it's good to put in context what the admin sees and what the candidate sees. So what you're seeing here is a list of virtual sessions that we set up. These are just classroom sessions in Meridian. And this is how we see it, but when a candidate logs in to Meridian and they sign up for a virtual session, they see a similar interface, which is why I just included one. What they would normally see there is a blue button that just says enroll, and they would pick whatever session they wanted to enroll in. And to mimic the classroom, Meridian did a really good job of this. They have enrollment capacities, they have registration deadlines, they have assignments you can attach to the virtual classrooms. You assign an instructor to a classroom, the instructor goes in and grades assignments. They have all the same features that you would expect, and they have robust reporting as well, where you can find out attendees, who didn't complete, who completed, if they need to be deferred. So not only was the whole configuration pretty easy to set up, but the tracking and the reporting, which is what our team was pretty heavily focused on because it is so important. It is the last piece of their journey. We need to make sure they completed the assignment. The back end of that was extremely crucial to us, and it worked seamlessly. Candidates were able to go in and access these sessions without an issue. And we were able to print attendee lists. We could survey them. We can send them automatic email reminders of their upcoming session. They would log in and look at their schedule and their calendars, and they would see when their sessions were scheduled. They could cancel a session, enroll, and we could set limits as to how many people for each session, as you could see here. And then on the left-hand side, of course, you could filter for all the completion and active sessions as well. And I can't remember, I think during the pandemic, Meridian usage, and Sean might be able to speak more to this, but I remember reading that Meridian usage, like it went sky high, like 1,000% or something. And this is why I'm not an actuary, because I don't have an actual number, but it was so high and the system remained rock solid. It was stable, it was up, and it got us through a very critical point in delivering these virtual sessions. So it didn't waver at all, and it was there for us. And as we all entered into this uncharted territory, we were pleasantly surprised that we had absolutely no issues. This was the quietest, I think, launch of anything we may have ever done that affected so many candidates. So we're really pleased with how this worked.
And it affected them at a time when the tension is high in terms of they're taking one of the last steps towards designation. So this is not the time when they want to be delayed. They never want to be delayed. That we always get questions about delays, but of all the times to put a barrier up, this would not have been one of them. So the fact that we got very little, if any, reaction in terms of the quality of the delivery. We got questions. And we had people wondering, well, why can't I go in person? And all the general kinds of angst that you would expect. But the delivery from the delivery side was seamless.
Right. And raises often hinge on associateship and fellowship. So
Yeah.
even more reason, it was very near to their heart during all this, the pandemic and everything that was going on. So it was very, very critical for everybody involved. So very pleased with the outcome of both Domino 1 and Meridian. It really got us through and carried our candidates through as well.
So while we're waiting for some questions to come through, I've got a few for you both. And I'll start, Leslie, with the most recent topic, blended learning.
Mhm.
Do you expect you'll sustain kind of blended learning going forward? I mean, and as the
Yes.
world starts to move back to in person and everyone getting together, is this something that's in your plan for the future?
It is. We had the same question several months ago, and it was decided that we do want to still offer that flexibility to candidates. As we mentioned, we are a global organization, and especially now with maybe travel restrictions or funds that may not be available, candidates can't always travel to an in-person meeting in the United States or overseas to complete their associateship or fellowship. So, as Michael mentioned before, we are still going to offer virtual sessions, but we're also going to offer an option to attend a meeting in person. So we did some testing on that, and we found that Meridian can also support that. We can set up our virtual sessions, our module, and also have the in-person learning. So we pivoted a little bit more to another phase of the pandemic and how to deliver content. And again, that piece works fine as well. So we will maintain virtual offerings because they actually like it and they continue to want it.
All right, it's good to
So
hear.
Sean, before you get your next question, there's a question I think that fits here, which we got in the back, which asked, is it an opportunity for hybrid, or is there a possibility of diminished quality, or is there a trade-off? And so looking at that in the environment that Leslie just described, so is that good or bad or indifferent in terms of the learner experience? And what we're looking at it, at least maybe what I'm looking at it as, is a trade-off. So when you're in person or when you're not in person, you don't get to go to the banquet. Right? You don't get that sort of some of the in-person networking, some of the in-person celebratory element of some of our in-person programs. On the flip side, however, when we went hybrid and blended, it actually created opportunities and actually improved certain elements of the programs. For example, in one of our in-person programs, or actually both of our in-person programs, there are presentation elements of various kinds. And in one of the programs, you actually get some tips from communications experts, and then you leverage those and you present to a small group. And traditionally, because it was in person, that all happened in a very compressed period of time. So when you were in person, you came with some idea of what you were going to present, and then you got some real-time instruction on presenting, and then sometime later that day or early the next day you presented. Which, if that sounds a little compressed to you, then you agree, and so do we. It's a little rushed, and we would get feedback from candidates saying, "Man, that communication content would have helped like a week ago when I was writing my content and thinking about how to present." And in a virtual environment, what has happened is that the experience has become distributed over time. So there's the e-learning piece, and then there are virtual pieces, and then there are in-person pieces. And by actually being virtual, it's actually spread it out more. And therefore, we actually were able to improve the overall journey by breaking up those pieces. When you're in person, breaking up pieces is really, really expensive, right? So you can't, you've got people there for 2.5 days or whatever you have them there for, it's all crunched in live. You don't bring them live a month earlier and then bring them back live again. You put it all together. Being hybrid or blended actually was an improvement in that regard, and we saw benefit to it. So no, you can't be there to enjoy dinner. But getting things remotely gives you other opportunities that I think the pure in-person experience may actually didn't afford opportunities to do.
Good answer. I've got another back to xAPI, if you don't mind. You mentioned really wanting to see insight and value from that insight is one of the jumping off points for you to start with xAPI. How was the journey And do you have any advice for others who may be starting out on it?
Well, we're on the journey, so I can't say, so the jury is still out on much of that. But what we're getting returns on already are a couple of areas. One, looking at how we're going to gather data on which of our resources are being accessed versus not. So our candidates taking advantage of the materials that we are providing. So we're already starting to see some of that data and gain insight into what they're looking at and what they're not looking at. The other part that we've just embarked on, for us, these are, as Leslie said earlier, these are very large modules. So this is not a 1 hour or 2 hour experience. These are modules that are experienced in sequence over a much longer period of time. But we don't always know how long that period is and what's going on in between the beginning and the end. So that from the delivering value perspective, we actually see that, because we see it as a journey, we want to figure out how to bring our candidates along on the same journey. So where a candidate sometimes says, I want this done as quickly as possible. We're saying, yes, we understand that. And there is value in terms of having a more robust experience with the module and with other candidates who are in the same place that you are as a candidate. So that, I can't say that I can't give the punchline yet, because I can't say, and here's what we presented to leadership, and here's what they signed off on as the next step. So the end of the story is not quite there yet, Sean.
Very fair. What about this question from Elizabeth Hamilton?
Yeah, when you said you noticed it in connecting, how we knew the learners were connecting and what tools were they using? So one element of the infrastructure that we built out was a custom tool for them to be interacting in. So we've got an actual mobile enabled space. We took a forum that we had built, shifted it to a mobile environment, and then hooked it up to the rest of the ecosystem. So that part of the system is listening, basically, for these xAPI statements that are being flown around, that are being tracked, and that part of the ecosystem is where they are actually engaging with each other. So therefore, we're seeing the engagement directly. I would defer to Sean and Michelle and Paul for examples of, are there any platforms out there, any of the existing social platforms that are xAPI friendly, in terms of, what if I wanted to hook something else into the infrastructure? Would that piece be prepared to be listening to what learners are doing in another part of the infrastructure and moving forward? Or perhaps some new, maybe the LMS itself, maybe Meridian itself actually has, well, you don't have to send them somewhere else, because Meridian has a place where they could go and you could track. But Elizabeth, I hope that piece answered the question directly. That piece of the infrastructure was custom. It was a tack on to something that we were doing, and we brought it into a mobile space, and that's how we could see what was going on.
Well, Michael, I can say we have some interesting things that I think are really going to bring xAPI and social on our roadmap, and would love to speak with you about those and in the future. I've got one last question though for Leslie, if that's all right, about your multi-content authoring.
Absolutely.
Just curious about the scope of the problem. You showed that old Word document. I mean, how many review cycles did you need to manage? and now how many are you able to support today?
Well, we could only do one at a time back then, because we received so much feedback from all the volunteers, and it was so text heavy and it was so time consuming. We had to space it out, so we really could only work on 1, 2 at most modules at once. The issue was that they didn't have a window or insight into what the other one was doing. So now it saves us a ton of time. But back then it really limited us as to how much we could change at once and how much we can grow. And we couldn't really do as much as we wanted. And that really enabled us to take a step forward and to deliver better content, more informed content, and more relevant content, really, is what it boils down to, because we had modules that were just outdated and old, and we just couldn't get to them. And we knew it, and the candidates knew it, and the members knew it from the PD side of things, professional development. So it really enabled us to grow our content more and have better offerings and better quality offerings to our actuaries and candidates.
Sean, I'll give a recent example. So I don't know exactly what it looked like back in the day, and I'm kind of glad.
You're lucky
that
about that.
Thank you.
Let's just say
I'm very glad that I don't. But as a current example, we recently created a multi-module certificate program, and each module would go through stakeholder review. And we would open the window for a week, say, give us your comments, and then we would spend a few days to a week, depending on the depth of the comments. We'd spend a few days to a week addressing them, and then we would kick a note to our internal reviewers saying, okay, here's what they said, here's what we did with it, what do you think? And then we give them a few days to do that, and then we'd spend another day or two addressing whatever they wanted to clean up. Some of those reviewers have actually gotten a little bit even more engaged with the tool, and some of them are actually learning dominKnow, so they're like, I'll just do it, and they'll just make the change on the fly. But that's what the environment affords. And so what used to be sort of this craziness that Leslie was describing is now, for any particular module, in a span of a couple of weeks, it's gone through 2 review cycles, one with our volunteers, one with our internal reviewers, and it's clean and ready to go. Oh, and if there was a volunteer who wanted to know what happened to one of their comments, they probably were already sent a notification if they had asked, because we said, oh, here's how we cleared that. So it turned what must have felt like an infinite process into a couple of weeks, and that's module by module. So the whole that pipeline was flowing for months on end, one module at a time, and it enabled that rapid turnaround and we were getting input from everyone we wanted. It wasn't limited because of bandwidth. We didn't have to say, all right, who do we want to send this review to because we can only take so many. It's like, no, here, everybody have a go in 2 rounds.
Yeah, we normally had at least 3 review cycles back in the old day, just because it took that long to send out our edits and receive edits back. That added a lot of padding time to their content review cycle. And oftentimes we were late in delivering our modules, and we would commit to a date. And for FAP, Fundamentals of Actual Practice, that was first released in 2006. And I think we were late on every single module, and candidates were chomping at the bit for it. And they were very upset and very angry that we did not meet our stated deliverables, because we thought we could do it. But until we got into the weeds, we realized, wow, this is so much bigger than us, and we're having a hard time managing it. So that was the early days of e-learning. It was very, very delayed. And we had a candidate, file a complaint with Better Business Bureau against us because we were late with the module. That's how upset they were. So we really had to get away from that and find a new process. Everything was emerging. We didn't really know what tools were out there until we decided, okay, there's a content management system that could manage all of our learning content. Let's look at that now. So as soon as it was available, we really jumped on that, and it really did save us in more ways than one. And just to piggyback on what Michael said, the volunteers, the learning curve for them to use the content review feature, it's pretty simple. Some of these actuaries certainly are not used to using such tools, and dominKnow made it really easy because they had a whole documentation package that you could send off to volunteers, and they were able to just go through, see what they had to do, and they got in there and did that. And we were available for training and additional questions, etc. But it really worked out well, and it worked very quickly. So that was really a lifesaver for us. It was just such a hard slog the first few years when we were releasing modules. So this definitely compressed every timeline in our process.
Perfect. Well, we are just about out of time for questions here. Leslie and Michael, thank you both so much again for a great event with us.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. There's our contact information if people do have follow-ups afterwards. If we left you a little bit hanging on any of our answers, or if you had follow-ups, that is where you reach us.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate everybody joining.
Here you will also find the website link for Meridian. Of course, feel free to check them out for any other resources you're looking for here. At this point, I'd like to invite all of you to some other upcoming webinars with us. You can, of course, register for these events for free at trainingindustry.com. As always, our events and product demos are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, CPTM, ISPI, and HRCI certifications. What is CPTM? The Certified Professional in Training Management Program is designed to help you manage the future training needs of your organization. You can register for a virtual practicum now at trainingindustry.com/CPTM. And don't forget to register for our next TICE virtual conference happening in September. As always, it will be jam-packed with industry leaders and insights from across the globe. All right, again, Leslie, Michael, thank you both so much for a great presentation today. A thank you also goes out to our sponsor, Meridian Knowledge Solutions, and to all of you for attending today's event. For now, I'm Sarah Gallo of Training Industry, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.